Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the truly brilliant mental frameworks of Seth Godin. We're going to figure out exactly how to help you break free from all that passive waiting and start creating work that actually matters. Look, if you've ever felt stuck, or maybe you've caught yourself quietly quitting on your own big ambitions, well, you are in the exact right place. Let's figure out how to finally get you off the sidelines.
So, we all have this nagging desire to make some sort of life change or start a new project, right? Maybe it's finally cleaning out that attic or starting a YouTube channel or, actually sitting down to write that book you've literally been thinking about for years. It's this deep ache that answering emails and doing busy work just can't cure. Yet, what do? We constantly invent these really practical sounding excuses to avoid doing the actual work. We tell ourselves, oh, I need a better camera before I start that channel, or I just need to do a little more research before I start writing. We substitute busy work for real progress, sit back and just wait for this perfectly magical moment that, let's be honest, is never actually going to arrive.
All right, let's get into Section 1, the resistance holding you back. Let's dive right into this psychological force that keeps us totally stuck in our nice, comfortable hiding places.
Godin actually points out that things like writer's block didn't even exist 100 years ago. I mean, it's literally an invention. We often mistake this internal friction for some kind of sign that we should stop, but really, it's an evolutionary defense mechanism. Think about it. Since our school days, we've been conditioned to avoid putting ourselves on the hook. We basically manufacture resistance to protect ourselves from the vulnerability of doing something that might actually matter. Because doing something that matters, that means opening ourselves up to criticism, to judgment, and to the very real possibility of failure. So here is a massive mental reframe for you. If you don't feel resistance, your work might not be important enough. Instead of running away from that discomfort, use the resistance as a compass. When that familiar, heavy hesitation shows up, just pause for a second and say, hey, thank you for letting me know I'm on the verge of doing something important. Seriously, don't fight it. Let it point you directly toward the hard, necessary work that's actually going to move the needle in your life.
Moving on to Section 2, problems versus situations. This is where we look at how categorizing your obstacles can instantly, and I mean instantly, dismantle your favorite excuses.
Okay, so think of a situation as just a fundamental fact of the universe. You can't change the weather, you can't rewrite the laws of physics, and you definitely cannot control the fundamental actions of another person. If you're dealing with a situation, you have absolutely no choice but to let yourself off the hook and simply accept those realities. Like, why waste your precious energy stressing over gravity or a random rainstorm? They don't have a solution. You just have to accept them and move on.
A problem, on the other hand, can be solved. You just might not like the solution very much. Having a tough 15-minute conversation with your boss to ask for a raise, that is a problem. It has a crystal clear solution. You just might not enjoy the sheer uncomfortable awkwardness of actually executing it. Sticking to a budget, getting in shape, learning a complicated new piece of software, these are all totally solvable problems.
And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates a massive breakthrough for us. So much of our daily paralysis comes from incorrectly treating solvable problems as if they were permanent situations. We act like we're literally trapped by the immutable laws of physics, when in reality, we're just avoiding a temporary moment of discomfort. We build these massive, impenetrable walls out of problems we just don't want to put the effort into solving.
Let's look at how this plays out in the stories we tell ourselves every day. When you say, I'm improving my health, but my spouse hates it, man, that word but is doing a lot of heavy lifting. It makes your spouse the permanent excuse for why you might eventually quit. By simply swapping the word but for and, everything shifts. You're suddenly holding space for two different realities to be true at the exact same time. You are making positive changes, and your spouse is unhappy. It's no longer this giant, hard stop sign. It's just a problem you can choose to navigate. Think about it like this. If you decide to run the Boston Marathon, you don't get to walk up to a coach and say, hey, I want to run 26.2 miles, but, I want to finish without getting tired. No way, that's not allowed. You absolutely cannot expect to do important work without facing exhaustion or friction. The secret to finishing isn't magically avoiding the fatigue. It's simply deciding where to put the tired and pushing forward anyway. Accept that it's going to be hard, pack the fatigue in your backpack, and just keep running. All right, Section 3. Stop waiting, pick yourself. Let's see how this all builds into a really actionable blueprint for getting you off the sidelines.
Ever since high school, society has essentially trained us to wait for permission. We wait for an acceptance letter from a college, an offer letter from a boss, or for some agent to finally say our book is good enough to publish.
The entire system is literally built to keep you hiding out in a safe, comfortable holding pattern. But here's the reality check. The gatekeepers, they're gone. You have the power to simply authorize yourself. No one is forcing you to sit this out. You are actively choosing to wait.
So the crucial point here is to bypass the sheer paralyzing overwhelm of trying to change the whole world at once. Instead, follow this simple 3-step blueprint. First, find the smallest viable audience, maybe just one person, like your sister or your neighbor. Second, make the smallest viable art, the tiniest meaningful shift you can possibly create. And third, put it out there. Like if you've been paralyzed for 20 years about going to nursing school, don't try to revamp your whole life today. Go volunteer at a senior home for 2 hours a week. Impact one single person. That is absolutely enough to start.
As you create this work, you've got to ask yourself Godin's 2 foundational questions of intentional design. Who is this exactly for? And what specific impact is it supposed to have? If you can't specifically answer those questions, you're likely just floundering around, or worse, seeking empty status and approval from a generic crowd you don't even know. Answering these specific questions gives you the exact laser focus you need to beat back that resistance we talked about earlier. Section 4. The perfectionism trap. Let's look at how the illusion of being perfect is actively preventing you from sharing your gifts. We so often confuse the word quality with luxury or flawlessness, like a handcrafted Rolls Royce. But true quality, it just means your work successfully meets its intended functional spec. Think about a 1984 Toyota Camry. It's a high-quality machine because it reliably gets you from point A to point B. That is exactly what it was built to do. Once your work meets the spec, spending another 3 months tweaking the font on your website, that's just you stalling. And there is a massive difference between just ship it and merely ship it. Just ship it kind of implies you're pushing out rushed, careless junk just to hit a deadline. But merely ship it? That means you've met the spec and you are gracefully offering your work to the world as a detached gift. Perfectionism is really just a defensive tactic to delay this release. You have to merely ship it without desperately attaching your entire self-worth to how people react. It's a gift to the audience, right? Not a demand for their applause.
Okay, this next point might sound a little shocking, especially in today's social media landscape. But Godin argues that authenticity is a crock. Demanding that we be our raw, unfiltered selves at all times is a modern myth. Very often, falling back on the excuse of, well, I'm just being authentic, is nothing more than a free pass for unprofessional or just plain selfish behavior.
Seriously, think about it. The people who rely on you, your clients, your audience, your patients, they do not want your authentic bad mood on a Tuesday morning. If you're a heart surgeon, your patient doesn't want an authentic surgery where you just wing it based on how you're feeling that day. They want a consistently excellent one. The goal isn't to be raw, the goal is to keep your professional promise. Show up as the consistent, reliable, magical version of yourself that people actually trust. And finally, Section 5, go make a ruckus. Let's bring this all together and look at the lasting impact you can have on your community when you finally stop hiding.
Back in 1973, Seth Godin's mother worked at an art museum, and she wanted to host this entirely new kind of antique appraisal event. The night before, she was terrified. She was totally worried about the embarrassment and the risk of absolute failure. But she overcame her fear with one truly profound realization. If no one comes, no one will know that no one came. She took the risk without attachment, and the very next day, 5,000 people were waiting in line, and she changed her community forever.
So what does it actually mean to make a ruckus? Your goal isn't to be the loudest person in the room, shouting through a megaphone and chasing cheap status. That's a trap that will inevitably burn you right out. Making a ruckus doesn't mean breaking rules just for the sake of breaking them. It means consistently showing up, planting seeds, and generously serving your specific, chosen audience. It is doing work that matters, for people who care, over and over again. All right, so now you know how to dismantle your resistance. You know how to redefine your problems as solvable, meet the spec, and merely ship your work as a gift. The power is entirely in your hands. You absolutely don't have to wait for an invitation anymore. You can authorize yourself. So the only question left for us to wrap up this explainer is this. Will you keep hiding behind the comfort of those perfectly crafted excuses? Or what ruckus will you make today?